Distinguished guests, good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. May peace be upon us. Om Swastiastu. The Honorable PIARC Secretary General, Mr. Patrick Malléjacq, PIARC Technical Committee's members, the Board of Directors from the Director General of Highways, Ministry of Public Works and Housing of the Republic of Indonesia, speakers, panelists, moderators, and all seminar participants who are attending on-site in Yogyakarta and online through Zoom meeting. Welcome back to the Marriott Hotel Ballroom, Yogyakarta. Today, 23rd of November, 2022, we are here for the second day of the international seminar, Climate Change Resilience and Disaster Management for Roads. This event is hosted by PIARC World Road Association in collaboration with the Ministry of Public Works and Housing of the Republic of Indonesia, Road Engineering Association of Asia and Australasia, and Indonesian Road Development Association. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, before starting the second day of the seminar, allow me to inform you the overall agenda. First, we will hear the PIARC activity report on the resilience and disaster management for roads presented by PIARC technical committees. Next, we will hear a keynote speech titled Floodcast, a framework for enhanced flood event decision-making for transportation resilience. The next agenda, with a theme of building capacity for adaptation and resilience, economic, social, and environment. The third session will be about the best practices on climate change, resiliency, and disaster management. Next, there will be a roundtable discussion with a theme identifying the benefits of network resilience and disaster management practices and applications. At the end of the seminar, Indonesia's first delegate of PIARC, Director General for Highways, will deliver a closing speech. Without further ado, let's move on to the first agenda, PIARC Activity Report on the Resilience and Disaster Management for Roads session. The speakers for the session are Ms. Caroline Evans, Dr. Yukio Adachi, and Mr. Ernesto Barrera G. The moderator for this session will be Mr. Patrick Malléjacq, the PIARC Secretary General. I kindly invite Mr. Patrick Malléjacq to come to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Patrick Malléjacq.
Yogyakarta yesterday. So I would like to call to the stage our speakers. So we have 3 speakers. 2 are present here in Indonesia, and the other one is connected online. So please bear with the technology. We saw yesterday that our audio-video team at the back is doing a wonderful job, so I'm sure everything will be really perfect today as well. So may I call Caroline Evans to the podium as well? Caroline is the chair of PIARC Committee 1.4 on climate change and resilience of road networks. And she's also the co-chair of the ROE-AAA in Asia Climate Change, Resilience and Disaster Management Working Committee. She's based in Australia and has been actively involved in PIARC for more than 10 years in these areas. And she's also been involved in a number of international and European initiatives. Caroline, welcome. May I call to the stage as well Dr. Yukio Adachi from Japan. Yukio is the chair of our Committee 1.5 on disaster management. And he's also, or maybe vice versa, the executive director of the Hanshin Expressway Research Institute for Advanced Technologies in Japan. He's been engaged in expressway construction and maintenance for over 30 years, and his engineering background is earthquake engineering, bridge engineering, and asset and management engineering, so very topical as well. Thank you, Yukio. And our third presenter today is Ernesto Barrera from Chile. Ernesto works at the Ministry of Public Works in Chile, and he's very active in PARC in that he's the theme coordinator for the theme that includes those two committees that will be presented today. And he's also a member of our board, executive committee. And his current role in Chile is that he is the subdirector for road maintenance at the Roads Directorate, and is also the titular National Emergency Coordinator. So welcome, Ernesto. So thank you, everyone. And I will first call to the lectern, Caroline Evans, if you're ready to present the work. Thank you very much, Caroline.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for that nice introduction. And good morning to all attendees in the room and also those online. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. My presentation will be to provide an activity report on Technical Committee 1.4 on all of the developments which we're undertaking, and also to talk about the connections which our Technical Committee has to an associated REAAA committee, which I also chair, which is Climate Change Resilience and Disaster Management. Could we have the slides up, please? Just waiting for the presentation slides. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I'll ask for the person driving the slides to change the slides for me if that's possible. So could we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So to start off, there are a few definitions of resilience, as you can see here. In the context of climate change, it's recognised that climate change impacts affect more than one asset. Hence, consideration of things like traffic operations, safety, rerouting of traffic, communications to road users are all needed to help make communities and society operational again, particularly after an event. Yesterday, we talked about the need for holistic approaches to help drive sustainability goals and also measure resilience. This is also relevant for thinking about the connections which climate change has to wider impacts on transport, planning, emergency relief, whereby resilience plays a key role in maximising the economic, social and environmental aspects of road infrastructure and network operations. So this not only applies to climate change events, but it also covers other multi-hazard events, such as the ageing of infrastructure, security, natural disasters, and also pandemics, and also the amplified effects which can result when incidences often occur at the same time and concurrently. It's recognised that there are several levels in the definition of resilience. So here, very broadly, resilience means to plan and prepare for minimising disruptions in the face of shocks and stresses, to recover rapidly when they do occur, and to adapt steadily with an optimal economic allocation of resources. Next slide, please. So as we know, there are many climate change hazards that are occurring worldwide, and some examples are shown on this slide. These all lead to challenges in the road sector. So for example, in the incidence of greater road flooding, This places pressure on the drainage system and causes infrastructure pavements, destruction of pavements, saturation and potholing. And also we've learned since being here in Indonesia about the effects of the rainfall and the wet season on road pavements. There's also issues with bridge scour and deterioration in water quality from the runoff from roads and sedimentation. So this can all result in challenges in also network operations and interruptions, with the increase of storm-caused accidents, weather-related delays, road closures, interrupted travel, and the greater need for emergency services. There's also uncertainties in supply chain operations, where road maintenance backlogs often occur and repairs are needed to address the increased frequency and intensity of events. So when damages to infrastructure occur as a result of climate change, this results in large economic investments that are needed to replace the affected infrastructure, as well as economic losses due to the interruptions of services. So the recovery of infrastructure post-event can sometimes be more expensive than implementing adaptation and more resilient measures throughout the life cycle of the asset and increasing the preparedness and resilience over time. Next slide, please. So resilience is a cross-cutting issue within this PIARC cycle. Our committee has been working very closely in collaboration with other technical committees and also task forces related to resilience. We've looked at the differences between our committees through the strategic plan, and also we're wanting to achieve a uniformed understanding of the topic of resilience to ensure that there's no overlaps in our products and our reports. So we've identified that there are different coverages of resilience from a top-down network level perspective. Thank you. From a top-down level perspective involving the need to identify general methodologies and approaches to guide practitioners on incorporating resilience adaptation measures into their decision-making processes. This was discussed throughout the day yesterday, where the planning methodologies needed to cover preparedness, maintaining the robustness of infrastructure, and also the recovery of infrastructure were discussed. Additionally, resilience can be from a bottom-up perspective as well, which is looking at the resilience of the physical level of pavements, bridges, earthworks, and tunnel infrastructure, which are all other technical committees within this cycle. So we're maximising the outputs of our technical committees through the collaboration and discussions which occur across committees. That's the clicker. Thank you. So our technical committee comprises of approximately 50 members from 35 countries globally, and we're meeting throughout this cycle to develop actions relating to climate change and all-hazard resilience. It has been a challenge during COVID-19 because we haven't been able to meet face-to-face until now, which we're very grateful for. So we've looked at different ways across the cycle to communicate virtually, and I'd really like to commend the technical committee for looking at all different ways that we can connect. So this is through dedicated online writing days with focused time to develop the reports, regular monthly meetings between the working groups, and also leadership and small group discussions. Can we move to the next slide? Thank you. So in 2015, an international climate change adaptation framework for road infrastructure was developed. The aim of this guide is to guide road authorities through the process of increasing resilience of their networks and assets, and it's designed to be applicable at any level, such as at the national, regional, local, and asset-specific level. It was also intended to be a practical use for road owners and managers in high and low middle income countries. Here you can see the 4 stages of the original framework. In the interest of time, I won't go through each of these stages, but this report is available on the PIARC website for free download. So following the work in developing the framework, PIARC has also developed a number of other related reports. The first is a case study report about current adaptation strategies and methodologies to increase the resilience of road infrastructure based on a case study approach. And also another report was developed in the last cycle which looked at the refinement of climate change adaptation framework. And this included identification of all the specific updates which were needed to the 2015 framework. And these are also available on our website. We move to the next slide, please. In this current cycle, we've established 2 working groups. Working Group 1 covers uniform and holistic methodological approaches to climate change and other hazards. So this covers the concepts of all hazards and threats and a holistic approach to resilience whereby the wider impacts beyond the assets across the whole network are considered for all hazards and not just climate change. Additionally, we've established a working group 2, which is providing an update or a version 2 of the original 2015 framework. And this is taking on board all the suggested refinements identified from the report just mentioned, as well as the inclusion of new case studies and approaches. The framework is also looking at ways to allow the application of selected steps according to the level of advancement in addressing climate change in different countries. So for example, yesterday, Mark-Henry Ribberenzia spoke about the fact that LMICs are diverse around the world and require a flexible approach. Each of the working groups is supported by a case study task force, which has collected case studies to feed into the reports which are being developed. Next slide, please. So this is just a very brief outline of the Working Group 1 report. Thomas Bless, the co-leader of Working Group 1, will be providing a more detailed presentation after lunch today on this report. But very quickly, this report has been developed to consider all hazards and impacts on road resilience in the context of socio-economic impacts of hazards on roads, as well as the impacts of COVID-19. To develop more resilient frameworks to help us prepare for future events. Also, it looks at the organisational aspects. So, for example, identifying the right data and also the stakeholders that are needed for engagement. The report is also looking at decision-making under deep uncertainty and the use of economic techniques to determine which adaptation options are the most appropriate for selection. So, for example, not all adaptation interventions are suitable for every location or the same location. Next slide, please. So we're also developing, as mentioned, an update to the framework. So this is being looked at by Working Group 2. So the purpose of this is to assist transport decision makers in developing more appropriate climate change responses to their road transport infrastructure. So many countries face problems relating to the effects of climate change on transportation, as we know. Some of these countries have pursued adaptation strategies, but these are separately and often without the benefit of the lessons learnt from other countries. So other countries often don't have the resources to develop adequate strategies or identify practical responses. So their transport infrastructure remains vulnerable to increased damages from climate change impacts. The framework is based on a collective experience of countries in addressing the impacts of climate change on road infrastructure and also network operations to be very helpful for other countries. And it aims to be applicable to a wide range of circumstances, whatever the status of climate change development is in their particular country. Now, Stuart Woods will provide a presentation with further details on the Working Group 2 progress after lunch as well. And this has also been developed together with the Working Group leader of Working Group 2, Gordana Petkovic. Next slide, please. So resilience is also a very important area to REAAA. As a result, a new REAAA working committee has been established which aligns with the PR Technical Committee terms of reference for TC 1.4 and also 1.5 disaster management led by Yukio Adachi. So in this sense, this committee has been set up as a mirror group to mirror the terms of reference between the two committees. The aim of this is to provide an opportunity to share information across committees and also to build in the actions from REAAA membership countries which are not part of the PIAC membership. Next slide, please. So this very quickly shows the work plan of the REAAA committee. I won't talk through this in too much detail because there is a lot on this slide, I appreciate. But essentially, there are two main stages of the work of the REAAA committee. So this is first the provision of input into activities of PIAC Technical Committee 1.4 and 1.5. So a case study selection process is now being undertaken where particular case studies are being collected across REAAA countries to not only feed into the developments of reports for the REAAA committee, but to also benefit the reports being developed under PIAC Technical Committee 1.4 and 1.5. The other area is around the implementation of climate resilience measures in Asia and Australasia. So this provides an opportunity to develop reports which are specific for the Asia-Australasia region. We're looking at developing a particular report at the moment on best practices to address the challenges and opportunities associated with climate change, and we're building off a previous report which was undertaken as an REAAA technical report delivered in 2017. Next slide, please. So the collaboration between REAAA and PIAC is very strong, and the establishment of the related committees therefore allows for the sharing of information and also experiences across the committee. It also enables the sharing of the case studies, which I mentioned, and there are a number of other opportunities which have been presented through the publication of PIAC Rose Roots articles. So there was a publication over the last 6 months which was developed on disaster management for the road sector during the pandemic, and this was written by Heri Veza, who's an REAAA member country from Indonesia, who many of you will know, and is also a member of the REAAA technical working group on climate change resilience and disaster management. So this shows the connections between TC 1.4, 1.5 and also REAAA. Next slide, please. Now I've just got 2 more slides, if that's okay, Patrick. So PIAC often collaborates intensively with other infrastructure networks, and this is shown on this slide. So PIAC holds 2 congresses each cycle. The next World Road Congress will take place in Prague of next year in October, and further information on this is available on the PIAC website. There are also linkages between TC 1.4 and other international associations, such as the BMVI Network of Experts of Germany, also in the United States, AASHTO, TRB and Federal Highways, the EU 4C project and ECTRI in Europe, and also the International Road Federation on issues around climate change and resilience. TC 1.4 also connects regularly with the UNECE group of experts on assessment of climate change impacts and adaptation for inland transport. So here there is attendance at the UNECE meetings to provide the knowledge transfer and exchange between PIAC and the UNECE. There's also connections with high volume transport. So yesterday, our keynote speaker, Dr. Andrew Quinn, he spoke about the 2 reports which are shown on this slide here. This is where PIAC Technical Committee 1.4 is also fed into the development of these reports, showing this collaboration. And finally, PIAC received an invitation to provide a presentation at COP27 last week. So a presentation was provided by myself together with support from Patrick Malléjacq and Gordana Pekovic on, it was through a session by the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure. And this was on the topic of engineering the vision for climate resilient transport, looking at new technologies, design, and also materials. Next slide, please. So in terms of forthcoming reports during this cycle, TC 1.4 has undertaken a case study collection. So all up, 71 case studies have been identified from 24 countries from around the world. And these case studies have all been collected into a database, and they've been integrated into the report developments which are currently being undertaken by Working Group 1 and also Working Group 2. So the purpose of collecting these is to identify issues such as vulnerabilities, critical networks, risk assessments and adaptation measures, and also innovative technologies. We're also in the process of finalising this case study report, and this will be published at the end of this year. Next slide, please. So as you can see, there is a lot of work which is being undertaken by TC 1.4, and I'd like to congratulate and acknowledge all of the members of TC 1.4 for all of their efforts throughout this cycle. We have a really fantastic group of people, and the knowledge sharing is really quite remarkable between countries involved. There is also a lot of collaboration, as you can see, with other networks internationally, and this concludes my presentation. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Caroline. This was really very interesting. And 2 remarks at this stage from me. So if you have questions, and I'm sure there are questions, please note them. There might be time at the end of this session this morning for a quick round of questions with the 2 panelists. And if not, there are coffee breaks exactly designed for that. And if you want to check those frameworks and reports in detail, they are available from PIARC's website, piarc.org, and you can download them for free. Our next speaker will be Yukio. Yukio, Adachi-san, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Yukio Adachi. I'm the chair of the TC 1.5 PIARC. I want to talk about the what is the PIARC TC 1.5 activity. But first of all, I would like to express my sincere condolences to the damage to the earthquake the day before yesterday. But you already have the amazing recovery work. Maybe that will be the good report for the future PIARC work. Okay, next slide, please. And next. Next one, please. Okay, we have the lots of the disasters. Our road administrators are facing, and we are coping with the different kinds of the disastrous event. Climate change-related disaster, other natural disasters such as the earthquake, tsunamis, volcanoes, and also we have the disasters except the left. That means the man-made disaster, such like a tanker fire or something like that. Next, please. So, now question to the, what is a disaster? So, currently said, I like this definition. Disaster is a crisis situation that far exceeds their capabilities. That means our road administrators build up the good adaptive capacity. Next slide, please. How we can improve the capacity? Impact reduction is important. Also, the effect reduction is important. But the issue is that how we can minimize the disruption due to the disaster. Next slide, please. So, Warfield indicated the importance of the management cycle. We need to take measures every kind of the disaster management cycle: mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. Next slide, please. And also, let me remind you that we have the 3 kinds of the disaster management measures: structural measures, of course, road network improvement, road component improvement, but we need to have the non-structural measures: timeline planning, monitoring, etc. And also, we have the measures of the social capital. Sendai framework, Hyogo framework of the United Nations indicated the importance of the social capital. especially the community resilience. Next slide, please. And also, this is a very important one. What is the goal of the disaster resilience? Actually, goals are moving. Goals are moving from the safety to the functionality. Our road administrators do our work to keep our roads every time, everywhere open, even in the disasters event. Next slide, please. So, PIAC made the manual to improve the disaster capacity for the many PIAC countries. So, the top right-hand side, there you have the we have the QR code in the next 2 or 3 slides. So please scan the QR code and please visit the PIAC website for the disaster management manual. Next slide, please. So PIAC manual displays the solution techniques for the every phase of the disaster management using the all kinds of the solution techniques. So it's like WIFT, mitigation, response, preparedness phase, and recovery, and WAF and WIFT. Anyway, structural measures, non-structural measures, and the social capital. So making the good net to prevent the hazard not fall into the disaster. Next slide, please. I believe that this manual is the first disaster management manual in the road business community. It covers the disaster management cycle and also the disaster management measures, and rich case studies, and include the high-income countries and the low-middle-income countries' experiences, and the kiosk, cross-cutting technology of the world, from the worldwide. Okay, thank you very much. Next slide, please. Now I would like to talk about what we are doing now. Next slide, please. So our strategic plan of 2020 to 2023, it says society is changing, challenging for the road transport sectors. Society changing, that means we are facing the changing the climate conditions and the extreme weather event. So now the road and the transport industries and the public administrators are increasingly interested in measures like they are promoting resiliency in road asset and addressing service disruptions and repairs. That is why we are making the activity. Next slide, please. We are a very small group, but covers all regions of the world. And also, it is very honored to say that we are very happy to have the very active, very energetic member from Indonesia, Dr. Heri Baza. Are you in this room? Okay. So could you give him the good hand to his great cooperation work to the PIAC work? Thank you very much, Harry. Okay, next slide, please. Now we have the 3 topics. One is the information and communication in disaster management, financial aspect of the disaster management, and update the disaster management manual. Next slide, please. First topic is that how we use big data, SNS information for the management of the disaster. So now we collect any case studies from all over the world. Now, next slide, please. Now we found out some interesting case studies from Korea, Japan. Next slide, please. And also Chile, and more case studies. Now we are analyzing the phase, and probably you can have the final report in the spring or summer next year. Next slide, please. And the next topic is the financial aspect of the disaster management. We need to consider the financial aspect in the every disaster management cycles. So for example, we have the case study. Next slide, please. Disaster recovery, considering the social and economic impact. We have the good case study from the Italy. Next slide, please. And also the emergency contract is also another aspect of the financial issue. We have the good case study from Japan. Okay, now working group 2 also in the phase of the analyzing the case studies. Hopefully, we can show you the result in the next spring or summer. Next slide, please. Okay, I already talked about it. Next slide, please. Next one. Okay. We already made some webinars and workshops and this seminar. So seminar with the TRB about the disaster management, the effect and the management of the COVID-19 virus looking to the future. And we have the last June, we have the international workshop, Kyoto, road disaster management using the latest information technologies, and this seminar. Thank you very much. And next slide, please. And I would like to talk about the future work. Next slide. Next one, please. So we're gonna have the next seminar in Mexico, Cancun, Mexico, in the February. If you are interested in the keywords, the sustainability, environmental issues, and the disaster management technologies, please join this seminar. This seminar will be take place using the hybrid format. And next slide, please. And I'm proud of the we can have the TC session in the Prague Congress in the next October in the Czech Republic. Our theme is the societal resilience involving the disaster, lessons learned from the extreme natural event, and information and communication management in disaster. So if you're interested in, please come to the Prague to enjoy our discussion and the good culture of the Prague. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adachi-san. Third presenter is Ernesto Barrera, who is joining online. And Ernesto is actually connecting from Chile, where it's quite late today. So I really would like, before even he starts his presentation, to thank him for the effort in joining. Good evening, Ernesto. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, good evening to all of participants of this important event. My name is Ernesto Barrera. I am a strategic theme coordinator, theme 1. I give my apologies for I couldn't go to this important event for Technical Committee 1.4 and Technical Committee 1.5. But I want to give some introduction and some notes about the advance of each Technical Committee and Task Force of Theme 1 of PIARC. The next, please. In this Theme 1, we have 5 Technical Committee and 2 Task Force. The first Technical Committee 1.1 is about the performance of transport administration. We have deliverables, we have seminars and workshops with a good advance in each technical committee in this technical committee. The next, please. Please. About the seminar and workshop, the Technical Committee 1.1 hold the first seminar in April the last year in Cape Town, South Africa, and the second seminar in September of the last year too in Buenos Aires. And the third seminar is programmed in the next year in the Shanghai, China. And workshop, they are hold 2 workshop, and in this month they has the third workshop in Singapore. We are a summary with different seminar workshop planned in this technical committee for the information of each participant of seminar. You can to get the information in this presentation. We are going to the next slides, please. The technical committee has different output or deliverables about the collection of case study, the full report. They are completed this deliverable, but they are working in full report in collection of case study about the other 2 working groups about the sustainable mobility plans and economic and social contribution of road transport system. They are planning the deliverables in these years. The next, please. The workshop, they have the first seminars the next week in Mexico, and second seminar under planning in the next years. Workshop, no workshop planned yet. We have to work for organize some workshop in the next year. Please, the next slides. We have a summary about the different activities of a technical committee. You can to see the different activities of this technical committee. We are the next slide, please. The third technical committee is about finance and procurement. They are the different deliverables about the funding and financing. These deliverables are published about the collection of case study and report on good practices, and they are working in the follow theme about the new propulsion techniques and funding and procurement. We have the full report on the at the end of this year. We are going to the next slide, please. And about the seminars, the technical committee has the same seminar about the technical committee 1-2 in Mexico to the next year, and the next year they have to planning one seminar and one workshop. In the next slide, we have a summary about the activities of the technical committee 1-3. Now we are going to explain about the technical committee 1-4. Technical committee, they are participating in this seminar. They are working very hard in different topic. Please, the next slide, please. The Technical Committee 1.4 is about climate change and resilience of road networks. The deliverables, they are working very good. They are finishing the collection, full report, one expected finishing in the next month. They are working very hard to complete the compromise for the technical committee. We are going to the next slides, please. About the seminar and workshop and conference in the last year, some in this same date, they had one seminar, or the first seminar in Uganda, about the climate change and resilience of roads for a low and middle income country. Was a very good seminar with excellent results. The second seminar is this important event we are working in this week. Workshop, they are made a workshop in the last year in Germany about the climate change impacts on road resilience. Very good workshop too. The next, please. We are a summary about the seminar, workshop, meeting about the Technical Committee 1.4. They are very good activities in different parts of the world, and they are organized meeting online too. Very good work in this cycle for this technical committee. The next, please, for the Technical Committee 1.5. Technical Committee is working and participating in this seminar. They are working hard too. They are give very different deliverables about the briefing notes, full reports. They are working in this full report for the information and communication in disaster management. Financial aspect of disaster management, we have a briefing note about the summary of international survey, and they are working in the full report for February the next year. And about the manual, they are publishing in August of this year. Like told us Yukio in his presentation. About the different events, about the seminar, workshop, and conference, they are did different activities. 2 seminars in Yogyakarta in Indonesia. This is the first seminars, and the second seminar in the beginning of the next year in Cancun. Very good place to realize a seminar, and they are made one workshop, one webinar about disaster management. The The next, we are summary about the different activities, about this meeting, seminar, workshop, and other events of this technical committee. They are working hard too. They are a lot of deliverables to give us in the next month. And the next slide is about the two task force, about the well-prepared projects. This task force finishing this year, they are give us the deliverables about the literature, about the collection of case study, and full report about the different activities and collection of case study. Very good work, and they are finishing in the beginning of this year together the Winter Congress in Canada. And the last task force is the 113. Is continuing of the task force 11. The next slide, please. And we are the different activities of task force 11, meeting and workshop. They are workshop in Quebec, Canada, and the last workshop in Mexico the last year. Please, the next slide. We have task force 113 is continuing the last task force, but the objective is to see a well-prepared project for low and middle income country to finish in June 2024. They are working recently in the middle of this year, and they are working very hard to get the deliverables commitment in this technical committee. Finally, please, the next slide. The different technical committee, well, this task force, planet, meeting, seminar, workshop, and other events from this year to 2023, and in finalizing in the World Congress. Finally, we have a summary about the different technical committee, the different activities in this cycle, and please, the next slide. And the different technical committee are working in different activities with events online, event face-to-face. Very important to interchange the different opinion about this topic. And the next activities they are organizing in face-to-face modality. This is a summary of different technical committee, in particular to technical committee 14 and 15, organizing this seminar. They are working very hard to give us the different deliverables and activities commitment in this strategic planning of this cycle. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm here to, if you give me some question about the presentation. Thank you very much, Patrick.
Assistance at the Texas Water Development Board, USA. This session will be moderated by Mr. Hiroaki Miyatake, Director of Geology and Geotechnical Engineering Research Group, Public Works Institute, Japan. Mr. Miyatake is also a member of the PIAC Technical Committee 1.5 on Disaster Management. I kindly invite Mr. Hiroaki Miyatake to come to the stage.
Thank you for my introduction. My name is Hiroaki Miyatake from Public Works Research Institute, Japan. I'm very happy to play role, moderate this keynote speech session. My institute, Public Works Research Institute, one of the most largest institute in Japan for civil engineering, was established just 100 years ago. So this year is anniversary year. It's my honor to participate in this session in this special year. And I will introduce keynote speaker, Mr. Saul Nuccitelli. He is director of flood science and communication assistant to of the Texas Water Development Board, and he will introduce floodcast system. This system is a statewide information system about water hazard for road administration. Saul, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay, please make your presentation as a keynote speech. Please start your speech.
Okay, very good. Can you all see my screen? wanted to confirm that you can see the screen that I'm sharing. Okay, very good. Good morning to you all. It's a good evening for me. Thank you all very much for the kind introduction and the invitation to come speak to you all today. I'm very sorry I was not able to attend in person. I would really have enjoyed connecting with you all more directly. Before I start, I wanted to briefly say that my thoughts and prayers are those with those in West Java who are working to recover from the earthquake and the landslides on Monday. I will admit, this is my first presentation where I'm talking to people on a different day. November 23rd for you, still November 22nd for me. If any of you want to tell me later what the future holds, I'm very curious to hear, especially any news of the World Cup. Apologies for that bad joke, but it relates to what I'm going to discuss, which is how can we better understand and communicate forecast flood risk, and in particular for our transportation systems. First, some acknowledgements. The Floodcast project is being conducted by the National Cooperative Highway Research Program and CHRP. They are a part of the Transportation Research Board, who is then a part of the National Academy of Sciences. The firm performing the work is Dewberry Engineers. Myself and others form the advisory panel supporting this work. I will discuss Floodcast, but occasionally also discuss topics that are not specifically part of the Floodcast initiative, such as the broader needs or other efforts related to flood forecasting and flood mapping. So additional content comes from the agencies listed down at the bottom. Why is flood forecasting for transportation systems important? I think you all know why, as I expect many of you are from areas that have experienced severe floods. But since I live in Texas, I'll tell you about several recent floods and their impacts to our region. This series of very serious flood events changed many people's perspectives on flooding in Texas. So first, in 2015, there was a record flood on the Blanco River, and this is a river in central Texas. It was approximately 3.5 meters higher than the prior peak flood depth. It was described as a wall of water that washed away many structures and the Fisher Store Bridge shown on the bottom left photograph. Thousands of buildings flooded statewide in Austin and central Texas, and also in the Houston, Texas area to the east. In one county alone, Hays County, over 2,000 homes were destroyed or severely damaged. Many folks died, hundreds of millions in damages. Cumulatively, multiple floods in 2015 caused over 40 deaths and close to $2 billion in damage. Next year, mid-April 2016, over 33 centimeters of rain in 12 hours fell in the Houston area. The Addicks and Barker reservoirs, two of the largest flood reservoirs that protect the Houston area, reached record levels at the time. Addicks had a new record by over 1.5 meters. More than 10,000 homes were damaged, at least 6 deaths, all of those were vehicle related. And then in 2017, the event I expect you all have heard of, Hurricane Harvey. Ridiculous amounts of rainfall, with the highest gauge recording over 150 centimeters of rainfall. Hundreds of thousands of homes flooded, over $125 billion in damages, and over 100 deaths. This series of floods and others around the same time made it clear that urgent action was needed to better address flooding in Texas, there have also been many severe floods elsewhere in the United States. And it certainly feels like they're occurring more frequently, with greater severity, and impacting more people. Floodcast is a program developed to help state departments of transportation better forecast and respond to flood risk. So what is that? First, it's important to emphasize, this is a research project, not an implementation project. We're trying to figure out the best ways to help each state department of transportation improve their flood forecasting. But it will not actually perform forecast or response implementation for any state department of transportation. While this project will provide resources and develop a flood forecast framework, it will still be up to each state agency to choose to implement at whatever level is appropriate for them, based on their capacity and their interest, if at all. This is not a mandatory program. Finally, why is this project taking so long? As I'll discuss, there are lots of complexities and moving parts. Perhaps the biggest factor is that technology has changed along the way, causing our proposed approaches to change. And I think it's only honest also to point out that COVID distracted many of us for quite a while. There are 5 key components to the Floodcast framework. First, meteorology. The key component there is the data from the National Weather Service and National Water Model, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But also other federal, state, and local resources may be available as well to assist with meteorological forecasts. The second component, hydrology and hydraulics, the goal of which is to translate precipitation forecast, how much is it going to rain, into a flood forecast. How much is it going to flood? What are the extents? What are the depths? The third step is asset management, understanding the transportation network. What are the locations? What are the elevations? What is the fragility of the system? Other components to support impact assessment. The fourth step is communication, how information is shared before, during, and after a flood event to all stakeholders. The fifth, incident management, tracking each event with storing, reporting, response, and recovery efforts. Okay, going into a little more detail. Flood forecasting, flood warning, and flood response can be complex activities that involve many people and many organizations. This Floodcast project provides guidance, standards, methods by which state departments of transportation can utilize a common framework to perform the many activities within flood forecasting, warning, and response. This project is meant to help orient DOTs and provide guidance on how to better organize and connect their many activities to produce better flood forecasting, warning, and response results. The first 3 phases of this project are complete, and you can review their products online at this link shown on the slide. Phase 1 identified important needs and data sources, and also provided case studies of DOT activities. Phase 2 developed a proof of concept framework for how DOTs could utilize a mature flood forecast system. Phase 3 tested that prototype with many DOTs. Phase 3 also developed a capability maturity model, which is essentially a questionnaire for transportation organizations, which, once completed, will provide users with general recommendations on next steps to advance their flood forecasting capability. Finally, Phase 3 identified open data standards and specifications that could serve as a common framework for DOTs to use. Phase 4 is the last and current phase of the project. One active change during phase 4 was to adjust the effort away from developing a specific software product for several reasons. One, the research project sponsors did not want to openly compete with existing software vendors. And then two, the new software, any new software, is almost obsolete as soon as it is written and published and needs to be constantly maintained. So funding for this research project is finite and not an ongoing effort. So the effort shifted from software development and instead focuses on providing a guide and a framework for DOTs of all skill and capacity levels to take their existing flood forecasting, warning, and emergency management capabilities and guide them on cost-effective incremental steps for improvement. The basic steps of phase 4 are to define the workflows, review them with state departments of transportation that have different levels of capability, develop more detailed case studies and examples, and then finally complete the guide for everyone to use as they see fit. Okay, but you may be wondering, why are the state DOTs, the departments of transportation, why do they need a whole new system for flood forecasting? Doesn't the United States have a federal agency, specifically the National Weather Service, responsible for flood forecasting? Yes, kind of. The National Weather Service, through their Advanced Hydrologic Prediction Service, called AHAPS, AHPS, that system has 3,600 flood forecast points. This includes both flow and elevation forecast data. But only about 200 of those locations currently have flood inundation mapping shown. Whether it's the 3,600 points or the 200 mapped areas, there are over 4 million road miles. For you all in metric, I think that's about 6 million kilometers in the US highway system. And these points do not provide sufficient detail to know where many roads and bridges may experience flooding. There's just not enough data. However, in 2016, version 1 of the National Water Model was released. This meant an almost 1,000-fold increase in the number of forecast points. So we went from 3,600 points with AHAPS to over 2.7 million forecast points with the National Water Model. However, the flow and elevation estimates from the National Water Model in many areas, especially around flat terrain, were not accurate. In 2018, when I still worked with the Texas Department of Transportation, flood forecasts in Central Texas, where there was steeper terrain, were pretty good. But the National Water Model flood forecasts along the coast in flatter terrain were not very good. The National Weather Service did not explicitly use these National Water Model results in their official forecasts, though they have been starting to use these National Water Model results as advisory and supporting data, and it's steadily been improving over the years. Improvements include moving from static to dynamic mapping. So that means rather than a single highest level of water, you can see various changing levels of flood depths over time. Those 200 mapped areas I mentioned earlier will eventually expand to complete coverage across the United States across those 2.7 million forecast points I showed in the prior slide. Additional improvements being discussed now are how to better harvest modeling data than what the National Water Model currently uses, and also better topographic data, so using 3-meter or 1-meter digital elevation models rather than 10-meter digital elevation models, which are more coarse. The timeline for producing these improvements is very aggressive. Version 3 of the National Water Model will be released in 2023, and in September of 2023, about 10% of the US population will have operational flood inundation mapping services. So this means dynamic flows, elevation, and mapping data for about 10% of the US population. Part of that 10% target includes the eastern part of Texas, so the Houston area. And so Texas state agencies are coordinating closely with the National Weather Service in supporting its development. Eventual 100% coverage for all the US is targeted by 2026. Again, to repeat, by 2026, dynamic flood forecast mapping showing projected near real-time flooding on maps will be available for the whole US. And we'll get to see what it looks like this coming year for 10% of the US. Okay, so the National Weather Service is rapidly improving its flood forecasting capabilities. But what about flood warning and emergency management for the transportation systems? Floodcast will help define those needed components. Transportation agencies need context. We may know how high the water is going to get from a forecast, but what about the bridges and the roads? How high are they? And what warning levels should be set? Maybe not just warning about a flooded road, but how fast the water might be rising, how quickly the flood is coming, or what flow is dangerous for scour, or what velocities are dangerous for vehicles and roadway systems. Those of you that deal with terrain and flood modeling will know that depicting and mapping flood levels over bridges is complicated, primarily because of the terrain model that typically shows what's called bare earth terrain. Bare earth means no buildings, no trees, no vegetation, no bridges. So when flood levels are mapped, like the image on the left, onto this terrain, one cannot automatically determine whether the roadway or the bridge is flooded or not. The image on the left implies those two big roadways are flooded. How can we get to the image on the right, where the bridges are mapped at the correct elevation in an automated way without ground survey, and thus be able to accurately estimate flood levels over bridges? One of the most common methods to develop terrain models is the use of LiDAR, light detection and ranging. LiDAR is captured in the form of a point cloud of data, the image on the right. This point cloud is made up of many XYZ data points, many three-dimensional data points all put together in a model. To get bare earth, features such as trees, bridges, even water are removed, the red and purple colors that you see on that image. But then you can reinsert back into the terrain model the red bridge data that you see to establish an accurate depiction of the elevation of the bridge. One approach we're developing in Texas, not currently part of Floodcast, but very closely related, is called healed terrain. Basically, it's an automated way to place bridges back onto the terrain model when developing flood mapping results. The bridge data is obtained from LiDAR data, and then using automation tools referencing the road network, we can place the bridge data back onto the terrain. This work is primarily led by Andy Carter out of the University of Texas. He's one of the smartest guys I know. And this work is still in development. And we're currently discussing with the National Weather Service if and how to incorporate it into the National Water Model flood mapping results. Okay, but bridges over waterways are not our only concern. The left red circle shows a road parallel to the waterway. The bottom red circle shows road flooding that is neither adjacent to nor over the river, someplace different. It's flooding somewhere else. So all roadway areas that could flood need to be identified. To best accomplish this, two-dimensional flood modeling is required. So what is two-dimensional flood modeling? A quick refresher if you're not a flood modeler. Since the 1970s or so, computer flood modeling has been primarily one-dimensional. That's the image on the left. The idea is a one-dimensional cross-section is drawn. That's all those little red lines that you see in the image. They're drawn incrementally to solve hydraulic equations, translating flow to elevation. The limitation is the length of each cross-section. The flood data is not developed outside the limits of those red lines or cross-sections. While 2D modeling has been around for almost as long, only recently has both software and computing power allowed large-scale 2D models to be developed on desktop computers. These 2D models can directly drop a simulated rainfall event onto a digital terrain model mesh, which will then compute infiltration losses and route water to low-lying areas. So with 2D modeling, you get a much more clear sense of where floodwaters will accumulate. 2D modeling is not yet available everywhere, but where it is, it can be a game changer in visualizing and understanding flood risk. The National Water Model may not be the only forecast tool a given DOT may use. There may be state, regional, or even local agencies with forecast capabilities that are also being considered concurrently when trying to decide how to respond to flood events. Different forecasts also have different durations, like short-term forecast, medium-range forecast. Each of the charts that you see here shows how the forecast might change over time. As you look down the different charts, the forecast is less uncertain. So you gain confidence in the forecast as you get closer to the peak of the event. Less differences between the different forecast lines. The trade-off, of course, is the longer you wait to take action, the more the roads might flood. So you want to take action as soon as you're confident the roads will flood, so you can send out road crews to close the roads, put up warning signs, whatever it is, whatever action you plan to take. It's also important to review multiple historical forecasts over time, comparing historical forecasts to observed results. The charts on the left are examples of forecasts over different time periods. Again, as you go down the charts, you're closer in time to the peak of the flood, so there's less uncertainty in the prediction or the forecast. But how do those forecasts compare to the actual event that took place on the right, whether it's measured by gauges or observed by imagery, high water marks, whatever it is? Hindcasting can help improve confidence and understanding of forecasts, and when possible, through machine learning or other tools, even improve future forecasts. Okay, so those were some of the technical concepts that are being evaluated and summarized for the floodcast effort. I'm going to switch now to a more general description of the work that's being performed. A demonstration dashboard was built, not the actual software that would be used, but an example of one. This helped us talk with and communicate with departments of transportation that didn't already have strong forecast capabilities, and allow them to consider more directly how they might use a forecasting tool. Ongoing right now is additional engagement with different state DOTs to understand their needs. And the research team is actively developing the final guidance document, taking lessons learned and information from cooperating partners. About a dozen state departments of transportations shared their insights and current processes. They brought other partners to those discussions. They provided data on key locations of interest and compared their information to those locations of what was available at the federal level. So then they could consider, well, we have these national data sets. How can either local or state data sets improve what the national data sets are showing us? They also completed capability maturity models, CMM, to assess their own current capabilities. The research team, they're currently assembling national data sets that could be used. They're sharing the dashboard template with participating DOTs. They've identified geographical areas that could be more or less accurate, depending on the conditions. They also are using specific examples, specific site examples and demonstrations with the DOTs. The next steps for Floodcast include data analysis, several components there. They're trying to help define elevation thresholds, such as replacing estimates of data like bridge heights that come from national data sources to using the more local, ideally more accurate data. Also, they're considering hydraulic data that may be available, such as rating curves and locally developed models. Some local hydraulic models may have better resolution or better accuracy than those national scale models. They're also considering specific topics like scour and how scour models can connect with flood forecasting. For example, faster velocities and greater shear stress are more likely to cause scour, and describe ways those models can connect to create better forecasts. Another aspect of the data analysis is to assess DOT locations of interest and see how they intersect with the National Water Model estimates and the National Water Model locations of those estimates. Not all DOTs have similar forecasting and warning capabilities right now. So trying to sort them into various categories based on partially the capability maturity model information that they provide, that'll help define how the guide will be structured. How many different audiences are we generally is the guide going to speak to? Another step in the Floodcast project is outreach. The research team is meeting and coordinating with many state DOTs. They're doing things like performing debriefs after flood events. And in those discussions, they try to conceptualize how predictions might have been different if the DOTs had a functioning flood forecast dashboard before and during the event. How would communication or decisions have been different? The research team is also performing discussions in multiple group settings, tabletop scenarios, forums, and other approaches. And then finally, the research team is continuing to develop components of the guidance document. The final Floodcast guide is planned for completion in 2024, and it seeks to provide the following items that DOTs can add on to their current operations. One, they're trying to find different ways to how to set up and operate a system. Two, identify or point out challenges and opportunities inherent with the systems that they have. Three, outline workflows and information flows and their uncertainty with each of those different flows of information or work efforts. This chart that you see is just an example of a workflow outline. And then finally, to show different approaches to decision-making and communication. Again, it's important to emphasize it's not a one-size-fits-all for all departments of transportation, but will help guide them to advance each of their different unique systems and capabilities. Okay, as I've said several times, different state DOTs have different capabilities for identifying and forecasting flood risk. This is somewhat because national regulations and rules have minimum requirements, but many states exceed those requirements. And so, as you may know, different states also have different levels of funding and different needs, different interests. Being from Texas, where I am, I'm going to describe a few capabilities in Texas about flood and transportation that relate to but are not directly part of the floodcast effort. In this online map viewer, you can get a decent sense of where rivers are flooding by color. Those are the small dots on the picture. And then the forecast flooding, what's going to happen is that outer color outside of the smaller dots. So green, it's not flooding right now. Orange, the flood is coming, that sort of thing. You can also click on one of those dots to see recent, past, and current river elevation and discharge at a specific flood gauge, as well as forecast plots that are provided by the Weather Service. Okay, the graph, the middle image that shows the graph, that's an example of one of these charts that the Weather Service provides. There's a line on the graph that shows initially some blue, and then it changes to purple. The blue is what was forecast, but is in the past. The purple dots on the right are the future forecast. So it's great to have charts with helpful information that show the peak of the flood, right? But most people don't know what 26 feet means to them. What does 26 feet mean? That's where the Flood Decision Support Toolbox comes in. This tool, and the visual is on the right side of the screen, was developed by a group of federal water agencies, primarily USGS, to help graphically show the extent of flooding from forecasts. With the FDST tool, you can use a slider bar to estimate which depths inundate which areas. So it's easy to slide up and down on that slider bar, a foot or two or whatever, to get a sense of what could happen, because of course predictions have uncertainty. There's limited current availability in Texas, as you can see on the far left map, but we're working with USGS to expand that coverage. We have just recently heard, and it's tentative, it's not settled yet, that the National Weather Service, their flood inundation maps that I talked about, that I mentioned earlier, the plans are to use this current USGS FDST tool and the viewer as the visual and web framework for the broader rollout for next year. Another point to mention is that at the federal level, national forecasts can only get you so far. DOTs need eyes on the ground in the form of gauges to measure flows, velocities, depths. Texas DOT is currently installing non-contact radar gauges. First two phases plan to install about 80 gauges total, and I helped to initiate this program in Texas several years back when I was still with the DOT. These non-contact radar gauges measure both flow and velocity. The purchase cost is about $15,000 US per gauge. These non-contact gauges can be high up above the water, so there's minimal risk of flood or debris damage. But they can be susceptible to vandalism and accidents depending on where they are located. But the initial results are very promising. There's high accuracy for moderate cost. Also, Texas and other states have been investigating how low-cost sensors, say sensors that cost under $500 US, how those low-cost sensors could be utilized as part of a gauge network. You can have all the models in the world, but unless you have actual live observations, you don't know how accurate your models are. As part of the work I'm doing with the Texas Water Development Board, we're developing approximate hydrologic and hydraulic models and mapping data for the entire state of Texas. This is not flood forecast mapping. In other words, it's not going to say how much it will rain tomorrow or flood tomorrow, but rather flood frequency mapping. It depicts the 1% annual exceedance or 100-year flood event or other flood frequency events. The National Weather Service and others are utilizing these frequency models to better inform their forecast models. These frequency models have the potential to greatly increase the accuracy of flood forecasts. Finally, for Texas, I wanted to make a quick plug for ongoing research that's being done both at the Texas Department of Transportation and the Texas Water Development Board. I've just listed the latest projects that are underway with my agency, which include how rainfall risk is changing over time and how to better assess our infrastructure in the context of flood risk. I encourage you all to reach out if you'd like to learn more about any initiative. In summary, different states have different flood forecast capabilities and are advancing those capabilities at different rates. Floodcast is planned to conclude in 2024 and will provide a guide for DOTs to better improve and better align their flood forecasting, warning, and response capabilities. The National Weather Service, they're developing forecast flood inundation mapping, FIM, products for part of the US in late 2023 and all of the US by 2026. And then finally, on a brief personal note, we all experience very similar problems and challenges with flooding and the roadway transportation system. I feel it's critically important, and I was very glad to hear this from other presenters at this seminar, that we should all share information and all our lessons learned widely and internationally for the benefit of all of us. Thank you very much, and this concludes my presentation. I can't hear the audio.
Please come to mic and name and organization, then make question.
Hello, my name is Gordana Petkovic from Norwegian Public Roads Administration. And this was a really great presentation. Thank you very much. It was so clear, so interesting. Everybody should have this. My question is about vulnerability. I'm sure that working on this, you have already, you see a big difference between the floods that have to happen because the meteorological loading is simply too high, but also the floods that come from a too low capacity of drainage structures. Is that a part of what you call capability, the vulnerability that is one of the causes from the flooding? Is that what you have inserted in capability, or is it answered maybe in the other research project that you showed on your last slide? You understand what I mean? Yeah?
Yes. Thank you for the question. Yes, the vulnerability or fragility of systems varies significantly across the United States. Different DOTs have different design standards for their roadways. And when they built their roadways at different times, different decades even, they had a different understanding of what the flood risk was at that time. And so some of their systems are undersized because they didn't understand the flood risk, or perhaps some of their systems were sized adequately to begin with, but are now undersized because of future development, new impervious cover, more water coming their way. Floodcast is going to touch on that, but there's really, I think, a bigger asset management concern, right? Ideally, you would like to build all drainage systems as big as possible every time, but that's cost prohibitive. And so each DOT has to make an economic decision as to what level of flood protection for what level or size of roadway. And that criteria can vary. So I hope that answered the question somewhat, but it's a difficult thing to answer.
Thank you. Are you satisfied? Please.
Thanks for your great presentation. As I'm very impressed at your address. This is Devon Kim. As I'm team leader over final business case over 6 toll road and 2 bridges in Indonesia for the PUPR. So my team should prepare the basic design for the 6 toll road. So our teams are already conducted a public consultation for the local government in Indonesia. The local government officials almost has a very big warning about this flooding from the climate change. So I'm impressed that your presentation is regarding making FIM is a map, flooding map. So now we cannot provide a flooding map to the public. So in this moment, please advise to us how to our construction road is to safety for the flooding prevent. Please advise to us. Thank you.
Okay, I want to repeat the question to make sure I understood it. Because I think I understood with local governments and we're providing map data, how will those local governments perceive the impact of the roadway systems? Did I summarize that question okay?
But it's Indonesia. I'm just asking in case of Indonesia is toll road the design for the design. So you have a very good knowledge for the forecasting flooding. So but our team doesn't have proper knowledge over making a flood map. for the project. That's why I'm just asking you, and I want to get your advice at this moment. But we don't have some toolkit for the making a flood map. That's why if you have some knowledge and advice, please give it to us.
Okay, I understand. I think the first piece of advice I would give is to obtain the best elevation information that you can. The ability to assess the terrain with LiDAR data is becoming much more affordable. Usually the way to obtain it is through aerial flights. So you put a plane in the air and the device shoots a laser down to the ground. And you can cover a big area with determining elevation data. That is the key. The elevation data is the key to developing reasonably accurate flood models. Without the elevation data, you don't get very far. Then once you have the elevation data, there are computer models that are becoming much easier to use to then determine the flood risk. And those computer models are even widely available, shareware. But I will comment on one sort of separate point that I thought maybe you were asking, is perception of forecast map data, right? There's always a concern about accuracy of your forecasts. You may, and that's honestly why in the US we have hesitated to show flood forecast before now. Because once you start showing maps that are inaccurate, people question your results, right? One of the most recent examples was Hurricane Harvey. And it was one of the largest hurricanes to hit the United States. We had flood risk maps that were available that predicted what that flood would be. And there was a specific decision made not to share that flood information with the public. Why? Why did agencies decide not to share that information with the public? The answer is that there was a prior hurricane years before called Hurricane Rita. And they made a prediction. This was soon after a third hurricane, Hurricane Katrina, who you might remember hit New Orleans. Hurricane Rita was the year after Katrina. It was coming for Houston. Rita was headed towards Houston, and they made a call for evacuation. The entire city of Houston, the greater metropolitan area, everybody get out. Hurricane Rita's coming, it's going to flood you. Well, mass evacuation from large population centers does not work very well. Even if you have highways that usually go both directions and you turn them both going away from the city, there were still traffic jams. Cars were parked on roadways for hours. People ran out of gas in their cars. There were buses of senior citizens where a bus caught on fire, I think, and some people died. I mean, it was a mess. And Hurricane Rita was not that severe of an event. And so the concern with Harvey, they had those flood maps for Harvey. The concern was, are we going to scare the public too much and cause panic and too much evacuation? And then you end up with a bigger problem on the highways than a problem with the flooding. And so one of the concerns that I didn't talk about, but I think you all are understanding from the story I'm telling, is the messaging is important as well. How we communicate what the level of danger and what the level of risk is. That's just as important as showing somebody a map. I guess I'll stop there.
Thank you, Saul. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry, my moderation is not well, so time is over. So this is the last question. You? Please make a short question for him. This is the last question, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Heri Paza. As you know, we are going to develop a new capital city, IKN, in Kalimantan. I would like to ask you the possibility to use the software floodcasting, because we should assure that our development is not going to be flooding. Now we have used the Mike 11, and also we use the SOBEC to simulate the flood for this area. Thank you very much.
Some comment?
Yes. Yes, I'll try to answer. We would be happy to discuss different ways to estimate flood. I heard the software that you all are using are Mike 11 and SOBEC. I'm familiar with those softwares. There are other programs, specifically in the US, HEC-RAS is used a lot for river systems, but one of its weaknesses is that it does not connect well with storm sewer systems and smaller closed drainage systems. So the choice of software is kind of important on what to use, but pretty much any model that has the capability to model a larger area can be used in flood forecasting in addition to flood frequency modeling. So I'd be happy to talk afterwards as well to learn more about the efforts with the capital city.
I'm sorry, now time is over, so I want to close this keynote speech session. I thank very much for Saul's nice presentation, and all people participate in this seminar and join discussion. Thank you very much. Terima kasih. Arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nuccitelli, for the insightful presentation on floodcast, and Mr. Miyatake for moderating this session. Let's give another big round of applause for Mr. Nuccitelli and Mr. Miyatake. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, the next session of the seminar will discuss the topic on building capacity for adaptation and resilience, economic, social, and environmental. This is the second part of yesterday's session, and today's speakers will be Mr. Luis Bettini, Mr. Takaaki Tanaka, Mr. Redrik Irawan and Ms. Alice Kurniawati, and Mr. Auckpath Sawangsuriya and Mr. Apiniti Jotisankasa. Mr. Sawangsuriya and Mr. Jotisankasa is joining us online. The moderator for this session will be Mr. Yusuf Adinegoro from the Ministry of Public Works and Housing of the Republic of Indonesia. Mr. Yusuf Adinegoro is also the project manager for supervision and planning for the Yogyakarta province. I kindly invite Mr. Yusuf Adinegoro to come to the stage.
thank you for kindly introducing me. And okay, finally we come to the last session for this morning. Hope you are all still enjoying the discussion for this morning. And it's been an honor for me to moderate this session. For session 2 discussion, we're going to talk about building capacity for adaptation in resilience. It's going to be very interesting because we have 4 speakers. They're going to talk about, the first speaker, they're going to talk about understanding road network vulnerability to climate change in Western Australia. Second speaker will talk about slope erosion prevention and vegetation recovery by using soil algae. And the third speaker will talk about a bridge management system for preventive solution of bridge deterioration. And the last speaker will talk about climate change, resilience and rainfall in the slope monitoring and management system for road in Thailand. Just let me arise the topic discussion for today. We understand that research has shown that an organization can only achieve business goals when it has the right capabilities. However, some organizations might have limitations to the resource or their capabilities. So, in many cases, organizations are difficult to improve their capacity. Therefore, we have experts for today's discussion. I would like to invite all the speakers to come to stage. First, Mr. Luis Bettini, please come forward to the stage. Okay. Mr. Takaaki Tanaka, please come forward as well. Mr. Redrik Irawan and Ms. Alice Kuriawati. And also we have 2 speakers who will be present virtually. First, Mr. Auckpath, Sawangsuriya, and Mr. Apiniti, Jotisankasa. Therefore, I suppose they will be given the presentation from Thailand. We all have the speaker here today. So for the first word today, I will give to Louis. Okay, stage is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, Yusuf. There we go. I need to click. There we go. Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to present and share Main Roads' West Australia's experience in understanding the road network, vulnerability to climate change. It is an honour and a privilege to be a participant in this international seminar on climate change, resilience and disaster management for roads here in Indonesia. Today I'll be talking about an ongoing project that Main Roads Western Australia has been undertaking that will improve its capability in strategic investment decision-making and asset management for its potentially vulnerable road networks and assets due to future climate conditions and events. This project is the first step for assessing road network and transport asset vulnerability in Western Australia and has mapped regional forecast climate risks, highlighting the impact of the road network, and has piloted a vulnerability assessment method which will help facilitate a complete network-wide vulnerability assessment for the state road network. It is also a leverage point for building capacity within our organisation improving broader processes for climate change adaptation. So a little bit about main roads. We are West Australia. We are the West Australian, or WA's, state road agency and operate out of 8 regional locations with our head office in Perth, which is the capital city of the state. Our road infrastructure is just one component of our state's integrated transport network, and what you're seeing here is the breadth of services and assets that we are responsible for on behalf of everyone in Western Australia. There are more than 18,600 kilometres of roads valued at over 54 billion. We manage around 12% of the road network, but that network carries around 60% of all traffic. West Australia's economy is driven by mining and resources, which makes road-based freight access of high importance in WA. Climate change in West Australia. So it's no surprise to all of you here that our climate is changing, and we're all experiencing the impacts of climate change. In Western Australia, we will see higher temperatures and more bushfires, increased extreme heat waves, more rainfall in the north, increased intensity of storms and flood events, and sea level rise. So a changing climate represents real risk for road infrastructure and the road user. For West Australia, West Australian road infrastructure, pavements and structures such as bridges and culverts can be impacted by flooding or cyclones, leading to possible severe damage, loss of function, or accelerated deterioration. For the road user, it results in loss of access or increased journey times, in some cases, especially in remote locations, where detours are not available, access is completely cut off, and journeys are not possible. And road safety is impacted due to the hazardous conditions for drivers. So it's understandable that addressing climate change is an important priority for our government at this point in time. This is jumping around a little bit. Oh, yeah, lag. All right, might give up on that. So can we go to slide 5, please? So why choose to do a network vulnerability assessment? Our strategic asset management has collected a great deal of historical data suitable to be used to assess network vulnerability, in particular for road users. However, we can recognise that historical data is not helping us anticipate and accommodate future climate scenarios and events. We've embedded climate change risk assessments into the delivery process for our major projects to help make sure these investments are considering projected climate impacts. However, this process wasn't helping guide our investment decision-making for identifying or prioritising projects. Network vulnerability and vulnerability assessments, as defined here, will help broaden our approach to asset management and, importantly, builds the understanding of socio-economic impacts and performance of degraded transport networks, such as the impact on road users or the communities and industries a road network serves. Next slide, please. A preliminary step for us was to conduct a detailed review of Australian and international literature, assessment models, frameworks, and approaches. Importantly, this review included the PR Climate Change Framework, plus also accepted internal documentation from Main Roads. Next slide. The outcome of the review was the identification of an end-to-end vulnerability assessment and decision-making framework, which can potentially be integrated and built into our asset management system and incorporated into our investment decision-making. If fully implemented, it will provide a strategic view of road network vulnerability that incorporates the impacts of projected climate scenarios. It should be noted that this project and pilot study has now only focused on steps 1 to 4 seen here and provides a treatment option as per step 5. Next slide. So a core component of the overall approach is the methodology used to calculate vulnerability. As can be seen here, the vulnerability score is comprised of components of potential impact, criticality, and adaptive capacity. Potential impact combines both exposure and sensitivity. Exposure is the function of the character, magnitude, and the rate of climate change and the variation of climate impacts. Sensitivity is the degree, one slide back please. Sensitivity is the degree to which something such as road asset or component is affected either adversely or beneficially by climate-related factors. Criticality is the relative importance of the asset or the network link or the contribution infrastructure makes towards a society or the economy. Adaptive capacity is the ability to cope with and adapt to existing climatic variability and future changes. Each component of vulnerability is built up from a series of relevant vulnerability indicators, and each indicator and component of vulnerability has received a weighting. The majority of these indicators, which are listed in the white boxes, are data-based. However, a key differentiator of this assessment method is there an element of stakeholder input. It is a combination of an indicator-based risk assessment methodology and a stakeholder input approach. This combination allows the assessment approach to be data-driven while providing flexibility for the local context as identified by stakeholders. If there are gaps in the data, they can be filled through the contribution of local knowledge. And the other asset-specific factors as part of the sensitivity indicator is an example of this. Next slide, please. So what were the inputs? To start with, for exposure, climate change projections for Western Australia were investigated. In Australia, climate change projections are available from our scientific agencies, projects changes in various climate variables. The data is available publicly and and is split by a number of climate sub-clusters. So Monsoonal North, Rangelands North, Rangelands South, and Southern and Southwestern Flatlands. Incorporated into the indicator was the change in the climate change variable for the appropriate subcluster. The variable used as listed here across the elements of marine waters, temperature, rainfall, wind, and other. And that other included the natural hazards of bushfire days and soil moisture. Risk scores were assigned based on the extent to which a particular variable changed and weighted using a stakeholder engagement approach. Next slide, please. For sensitivity, asset-specific data from our strategic asset management database was used, which included the asset age, the material type of the asset's current condition, the surrounding terrain, either whether it's flat or mountainous, and other factors from local knowledge. Our asset data is broken up to 100-metre road segments, includes details on our various pavements, our material types, culverts and structures, and covers the entire state-controlled road network. You can see here that our road network covers the entirety of those 4 subclusters. Next slide, please. The sensitivity and criticality indicators considers which climate risk may impact on an asset type. This is a summary of the various assets on the Main Road state-controlled network and the type of climate impacts that will be susceptible in a general sense. For example, increased bushfire weather will impact upon our timber and other vulnerable materials. and there is a significant number of timber structures in the southwest part of our road network. Next slide, please. Lastly, as part of the development of adaptive capacity indicators, potential resilience options which were available to particular assets were considered. These were split into 6 categories: avoidance, planned adaptation, progressive modification, redundancy, contingency asset planning, no adaptation, or non-structural management. Local knowledge or stakeholder input was the sole contributor for data for this indicator, and the indicator itself covers the availability of resilience options, funding availability, and the effectiveness of the feasible or selected treatments in adapting to a particular element of climate change. Next slide, please. The representative vulnerability scores which were developed using this methodology were on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is negligible and 5 is extreme vulnerability. Negligible vulnerability is when the asset is close to new condition and is unlikely to be exposed to major climate threats. Low vulnerability is when the asset has almost no defects and is only subjected to minor climate risks. Medium vulnerability is when the asset has noticeable visual defects impacting its sensitivity to climate threats, and the asset is exposed to some climate threats. High vulnerability is when the asset has evidence of failure impacting its sensitivity to climate threats, and the asset is exposed to extreme threats from the climate. Extreme vulnerability is when the asset is in urgent need of attention with extreme sensitivity to climate threats. The asset is also exposed to extreme climate threats. To date, next slide please. So to date, the project we have undertaken is to test our approach for its applicability when using our systems and data as a backbone of this methodology. We had 2 pilot studies, but I'm only going to focus on 1 today. Next slide, please. And this is the process that we followed for the pilot study, but ultimately a tool was built within Excel that pulled data from the various external sources so that the various indicator scores could be calculated. This including assigning risk scores and incorporating local knowledge and into various aspects of the assessment. Scenario analysis using climate change projections was generated with and without adaptive capacity. Next slide, please. And this was the case study that we used, the Marble Bar Road. It is a remote regional town in Western Australia, strategic lick in Western Australia. It connects small townships, Aboriginal communities, mine sites of economic significance. Traffic here is not in high numbers, but there is a recognised dependency on this link for those who use it. The region is already climate exposed and is subject to extremes in heat, bushfires and cyclones. The asset and components along the route are quite variable in standard and includes unsealed sections. I'll now take you through a few of the outputs that were generated using a network vulnerability tool. Next slide, please. So this is a resulting analysis of Marble Bar Road and its vulnerability to the impacts of climate change. The visuals are showing the results for the examination of the various assets and components for this road link across different climate projection timescales for 2030 to 2090 and for global emissions pathways such as RCP 4.5 and 8.5 from the IPCC. As can be seen, as the scenario becomes more extreme, and when you look at the images from left to right, so does the overall vulnerability of the network. But as you can see, there is already a significant vulnerability to the network at 2030. Next slide, please. We are now drilling down on the network vulnerability assessment for the emissions scenario 8.5 2090. This image at the top shows a vulnerability score based on the geography, which is recognising the effect of climate hazards of bushfire days and flooding which is influenced by the hills, ranges and river systems throughout this section. The donut chart provides a network or link view of the overall vulnerability of the selected range, and the table provides the average and standard deviation and maximum vulnerability score. This is a pre and post-treatment analysis. This is demonstrating that the road network is quite vulnerable, but somewhat adaptable. There is one asset that is considered not easily adaptable, which is influencing the vulnerability of the entire section. We built this functionality by using the maximum vulnerability score. So if a particular section or road or individual asset has a high vulnerability score, but the road asset has the rest of the road has low vulnerability, it doesn't get masked and is highlighted visually on the map. Next slide, please. The front end of the tool developed for the pilot study is seen here. The data slicer was able to analyse our input data and create various visualizations such as component, material type, or geographic analysis, and numerous filters could be applied. Ultimately, from this project, we would like to develop an analysis and visualization tool that can be used for all our data, and not just a demonstration. And so it can be used on a case-by-case basis or for a full statewide vulnerabilities assessment, the results of which could be used for strategic asset management or investment planning. The focus for us would be on to identify areas of vulnerability before incidents happen and to prioritise interventions through our ongoing program of works. Next slide, please. So what we learned from this pilot study is that this data, climate projection, and that this approach provides flexibility to utilise our available data, climate projection data, and local knowledge. As a tool, it allowed a quick and cost-effective strategic assessment of risk across the state road network, and this could be used to highlight climate risk hotspots and that are then further investigated with local and expert knowledge. Our next steps are to take a full stakeholder-driven assessment of the state road network and use this as a baseline as we seek to move towards to adopt a data-driven approach and continue building a tool suitable for ongoing use for both main roads, but also for our local governments in Western Australia. Next slide, and that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Give applause for Louis. Good. We come to the second speaker, Mr. Takaaki Tanaka. I would like to read his short biography. He's currently working in Nippon Koi and responsible for highway engineering such as planning, design, and construction supervision works. Currently, he works in Jakarta, yes, and he also worked for several projects overseas, right, like Nepal. Okay, stage is yours.
Okay, thank you. Selamat pagi atau selamat siang, ibu-ibu, bapak-bapak. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I'd like to introduce a new technique of the slope erosion prevention and also for vegetation recovery by using soil alga. So I'll explain about the soil alga, what it is. Next, please. Before, one slide before, please. Yes. Right. So today I'm talking about a very small, what should I say? A very micro thing, micro particle thing. We call BSC method, biological soil crust. This sheet is just a summary of my presentation today, and it is exactly same in your handbook, so you can read it if you're interested later. But in this sheet, what I want to say, emphasis, is this method is developed and tested with MLID and JICA and JPN, Japan Bosai Network, in my country. And no longer this is a test phase, but also already in the implementation phase in my country. Next, please. So what is a BSC method? BSC method is a biological soil classed method, and the spraying mixed liquid of BSC material, I mean alga and fertilizer and fiber. The material is, what is alga, is this green species, the powders. You can see maybe in the pond or the stagnant water around you. You can see the green particle in the water. That's the one. And also, maybe you may find some health supplement, chlorella, something like that. That also the species of the alga. And now today I'm talking is alga in soil. The method of the spraying is very simple, just mixed in the bucket in this material, and spray the material on the target slope. That's all, as seen in the photo. Next, please. All right. So, how alga protects slope? Once the alga material, yes, sprayed on the slope, so the soil alga make binding the soil particles. As seen in this figure, it's like a spider net, something, and making a sheet-like structure just on the surface. This is why alga protects slope for the rainfall. Next, please. Okay, where is alga? This is a splitting in the world, actually. The alga is a cosmopolitan species in the world. We can find everywhere, every country. And why we can see in the world is alga is a very micro powder particle, and it can be moved by the wind or cloud, or rainfall, or jet stream. And we can find all over the world. And one more thing I want to say here is the alga material will not disturb the ecosystem. Alga doesn't interbreeding with other vegetation species because the alga make increasing by the clone itself. Next, please. Okay, this is just an example in my country. The left-hand side photo shows the bad slope, soil exposed for long years. We tried for vegetation, but it failed, actually. And erosion is developing. Then once we sprayed the BSC alga material on the slope, Immediately 2 weeks, after 2 weeks, so the alga seat-like structure is developed, like a spider net on the slope. And after that, the vegetation will recover naturally. The right side photo is vegetation recovered after 3 months after spraying. Next, please. Okay, this is a trial spraying in abroad, Nepal. Why we choose Nepal is, maybe you may know, Nepal is a landlocked mountainous country, and we have lots of slope and landslide and heavy rainfall also. So we tried to the severe field. And the left side of photo, actually this slope is the same slope. Left side is BSC trial area. And the right side is just natural without BSC. So as you can see, the left side is not, the erosion is not developed much. But the right side, the erosion developed seriously. And the right side, so we could confirm the vegetation recovery also. This is just a natural recovery. And also now we are doing the other country, the Malaysia, testing now with cooperation with JICA. Next, please. Okay, so the only for BSC, sometimes, so as we can see in the Nepal example, so it's a little bit sometimes difficult to vegetation a lot. But now we are doing the combination with the existing method, I mean the conventional method. For example, slope protection net or soil seeding, something like that. And for example, the bottom left side photo is a slope protection net we did. But I also many times tried the protection net, but it is actually so difficult because the net should be attached with the slope. Otherwise, if we have some slope between the net and the slope, if there's a space, so of course the water will come in inside and the water flow, seed or fertilizer, then the slope protection many times fail. I also experienced a lot. So we are using the how to fit, maybe nailing or pegging, but actually this is difficult, I think. Next, please. Okay, so this is one of the combination, BSC plus hydroseeding. The spraying the seed. The left side is just only hydroseeding, the conventional method. And the right side is with BSC, with hydroseeding. So the difference is very, very obvious. After 6 months, so big difference there, like this. Next, please. Okay, this is another example of the combination, the BSC plus seat covering. The left side photo is site with seat cover work, but actually not success for a long time. But after spraying on the seat, after spraying the BSC material, so the vegetation can develop, recovered very well. This is after 2 months photo. So the combination, not only BSC, but with the combination with conventional method is very effective. That is our findings so far. Next, please. Okay, this is also my country's photo. We have lots of landslide or slope failure and exposed soil like this. And this material can spray by the helicopter or radio control helicopter. And right side, this photo is recovered, the vegetation, by the spreading by the helicopter. Next, please. Okay, so far I'm talking about only the good thing, but I have to say about the negative aspect also. The BSC method cannot apply everywhere. As seen here, slope with failure and rock slaking, that portion is not good for apply. And also the slope and the hard condition for example, vegetation species cannot survive. So that kind of the site, of course, so we cannot apply this because the natural recovery by the vegetation cannot be expected. So there's some limitation like that. Next, please. Next, please. Okay, this is my last slide. So as I explained, this method is very simple and easy method. So actually, so we are now looking for the pilot site in Indonesia. So if you interesting this method, you can see the YouTube site or the contact to me or the Mr. Imai here, my colleague. He can explain more detail of this method. And today, so I put one paper, the brochure, just outside this room. If you are interested, please pick it up. Thank you very much. Terima kasih.
Oh, thank you. That was a very interesting topic, I guess, right? So we come to the third topics. We have two speakers here. First, Pak Redrik Irawan, and then Ibu Elis Kurniawati. So I think you can manage for your presentation, right? Who's going to give a first presentation? Okay, time is yours.
Selamat siang, Bapak dan Ibu semuanya. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity given to us for presenting our teamwork to develop and improve bridge management system, particularly in planning and programming for bridge treatment in Indonesia. With some inputs and advice from Indonesia and the foreign expert, incorporated in partnership, the government of Australia and Indonesia for sustainability infrastructure named as KIAT. Our teamwork compiled this subject, me and Mrs. Ellis, to focusing in, next slide please. Bridge and environment condition in Indonesia, bridge inspection, bridge treatment alternative, and bridge maintenance and rehabilitation decision making process. Next slide, please. The background for the development is based on the result of Indonesia national inspection, 3 years in beginning with in 2019 through the 2021. It can be seen that there are several main types of damage generally occur, such as damage to bridge deck, and then destructive action of river flow around the bridge, including river bank, shore protection, and substructure. Some issues also occur in bridge pier or bridge girder, bridge bearing, and steel truss. Next one, please. Next slide, please. For this map, from this map, we can classify the damage based on the industrial location, which is in western of Indonesia. Damage occur from the heavy loaded vehicle, and then in the central and eastern of Indonesia, flooding and scoring happen. Also, the damage often occur on semi-permanent bridge in the form of wooden bridge and emergency truss bridge, which are still used to connect the road network to new development areas, especially in the island of Kalimantan, Maluku, and Papua. These temporary bridges require replacement to anticipate the increasing demand for the service load and traffic capacity. Next slide, please. This example of picture explain about deck damage and the common treatment such as crack repair and the steel plate bonding to handle the damage in the bridge deck. Next slide. High intensity rainfall also cause the flood and scoring, which can submerge the bridge in the part of Kalimantan. Next one, please. Score and flood event result in the bridge collapse also increasing every year based on data from National Disaster Management Agency. This must be corrected from me. Initially, damage occur in the score protection structure. As we can see that in 2021, 400 occurrence happen in to collapse the bridge. Next slide, please. Aspan defects also occur in the bridge embankment to cut the road networks. Next slide, please. And finally, the bridge is tend to tilt and collapse. Next, please. Corrosion in concrete and steel structure arise with impact of high humidity and marine and chemical industry environment in all national bridges. Next slide, please. The location of the hazardous earthquake zone occur in all of areas in Indonesia except in Kalimantan. Minor and major damage happen in widely in Sulawesi, Maluku, and Papua. Next slide, please. This is typical damage after the earthquake, such as support displacement, failure in expansion joint, and embankment occur in West Nusa Tenggara and Central Sulawesi. Next slide, please. That is next slide, please. That's one the reason the Director General of Highway developed a bridge management system since 1992, which accommodated emergency preparedness and emergency actions such as emergency bridge and equipment provision. Also, the bridge management system component focus in bridge inspection, and then the bridge treatment alternative, and also the how to planning and programming for the bridge treatment. Next slide, please. The first action we handle is in bridge inspection to increasing the accuracy of damage identification by performing and using the techniques bridge inspection, as well as verifying and validating bridge condition inspection. Based on the condition mark developed in 1992, which is 0 for the good condition and 5 for the bridge collapse. This condition mark used by inspector to assess the bridge in Indonesia. Next slide, please. For specify bridge condition mark, there are 5 element defect criteria. The criteria could be modified flexibility to accommodate a new bridge defect and failure tendency. The criteria is nature mark, which is the type of the defect, and the degree mark for the develop of the defect, and the extent of mark of quantity of the defect. The last is for the function and the implication mark for every bridge assessment. Next. That condition mark applied to each bridge element run in a hierarchy order, starting from level 5 in individual element to level 1 in bridge, to detect interpretation from the bridge inspector that can be evaluated. Next slide, please. Finally, bridge inspection system is established and by conducting inventory, detail, and routine inspection to identify the element and the bridge type, defect, and the condition reduction after bridge damage event, documented ongoing bridge treatment, and emergency action should be taken to prevent sudden dangerous collapse. Next slide, please. We implement the mobile and the web-based inspection tool also applied in bridge inspection, and the result can be validated by computerized system or manually by a bridge assessment evaluator. We can see that there is a process how to we collect the data, evaluate, and then determine the bridge suitable bridge treatment. Next slide, please. The mobile application also can identify application, maybe rough prediction based on embedded accelerometer in a mobile phone. Next slide, please. For the scoring, we also implement the drone to identify such as damage, such as a failure of a ground shield. Yeah, that's can be seen in the picture, and other damage that not identified by inspector if we in the location. Next slide, please. The second action is how to improving analysis techniques quickly and accurate to determine bridge treatment. We develop the bridge treatment based on the bridge condition mark as explained earlier. Next slide, please. Next slide. This screening criteria for the existing level 1 and level 2 bridge. The criteria based on the bridge condition, traffic, and the load. Using the condition mark to from 0 to 5, we can identify indicative treatment for suitable treatment in the bridge. Next slide, please. We also propose level 3 and level 5 for detailed element screening criteria based on the work in report, NCRHP report, especially standard operation for the clean, reset, coating, and repair, replace, and modify. As we can can see in the slide that we have opposite identification from the USA. Next slide, please. From that, we established the bridge routine, periodic maintenance, and the rehabilitation reference using by the bridge application. Next slide, please. The third action is increasing the ability to simulate bridge handling priority by increasing risk mapping capability, and preparing deterioration model. Next slide, please. This simulation running based on agile asset that recognized as now in with ERMS version 3 with the input decision tree and then deterioration model, maintenance cost, that can implement in the planning and programming, but this work is still not finished. We still simulate the criteria for the this simulation. Next slide, please. Such risk should be identified when bridge treatment implementation was delayed. That one we use the kind of tool. Next slide, please. This is some sample of decision criteria that we have a main concern to waterway for the climate change and then land use change. The decision criteria implement in superstructure level 2. Next slide, please. And then in the substructure. For the level 2, we identify the indicative treatment such as the routine and periodic maintenance, rehabilitation, and or reconstruction until the replacement of the bridge. Next slide, please. This main concern of our decision-making process. We don't have developed the bridge deterioration model. This deterioration model still used the model in 1992 because we have a lack of data of bridge inspection. That's why we developed the inspection tool to collect the data for develop the bridge, this bridge deterioration model. Next slide, please. That's why we use the routine inspection in terms of the effective resource compared to the detailed inspection with every 5 years. Okay. Next slide, please. That's all of my presentation. This is some example from for the bridge condition mark 5. That's the bridge can and could build in the such road network. Thank you for the attention.
Okay, thanks, Pak Redrik, for the presentation. It was really great. And then we come to the last speaker, last not but least. Are we already connected to virtually to speakers? I will invite Mr. Auckpath, Dr. Auckpath and Dr. Apiniti. Are they ready? All right. Can you show on the screen?
Hello. Can you hear me? Hello, everyone.
Okay. Can clearly
Can you hear me?
Your voice. Can you hear my voice as well?
It's good? Okay. Can I start?
Wait, just a quick introduction. In this last presentation, there will be two presenters, if I'm not wrong, is it? And the first is Dr. Auckpath Sawangsuriya, and second speaker is Apiniti Jotisankasa. So Auckpath is his work in the Department of Highways, Bangkok, Thailand. He got a PhD from University of Wisconsin-Madison, USA, and he was author for books and hundred of journals overseas, and also received a number of awards for his work from TRB, from RTPA, such as Katahira and Mino. I would like also to introduce Dr. Apiniti Jotisankasa. He's a associate professor for Department of Civil Engineering, Kasetsat University of Bangkok. He also writes a number of papers in journals. In this opportunity, they're gonna deliver a presentation on climate change, resilience, and rainfall in the slope monitoring and management system for roads in Thailand. Okay, screen is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the introduction, and very good morning to everyone. I'm online from Thailand. Again, my name is Auckpath Sawangsuriya. Can you show the screen for the presentation, please? Excuse me, do you have my slides? Can you turn on my slide presentation, please?
Have the files already, or probably or probably you can share your slides.
Share my slide?
Yes, yes.
Apparently, it's not. It's like an abstract of my presentation. It's not the presentation.
Excuse me, can we share our slides instead?
Okay, let me share my slides. Okay, can you see?
Yes.
Okay. Ajahn Apiniti, can you share your slide, please? I have some problem in my presentation.
So probably you can back to the first slide and click on the full screen.
All right, have my colleague.
Probably you can click the full screen first and share the file.
Right. Okay. Dr. Apiniti will share our presentation then. All right.
Okay, it's okay. I can see it now. You can
okay
continue.
Now?
Yes, it's clear.
All right. Okay, so the topic of our presentation will be the climate change, resilience, and rainfall induced slope monitoring and management system for roads in Thailand. Okay, next slide, please, Dr. Apiniti. The residual soil and the weather rocks slopes are typically found in mountainous regions and hilly terrains, especially in the northern and southern part of Thailand, and also in the ASEAN countries where the rainfall is the main cause of the landslides and also the slope failures. So this map that show on the screen is the landslide prone area, especially in the northern and southern part of Thailand, where the red zones indicates the landslide is likely to occur if the rainfall exceeds 100 millimeters per day. The yellow zone if the rainfall exceeds 200, and green zone if the rainfall exceeds 300 millimeters per day. Anyway, red amount of rainfall would be expected to cause the landslide for red zone with thick soil mantle, less vegetation, and greater slope angle. Next one, please. The rainfall-induced landslides have been becoming more and more severe in Thailand and also other ASEAN countries in the tropics due to the more frequent extreme climate conditions, especially the strong typhoon, prolonged and heavy rainfall. Such climate conditions on mountainous and hilly terrains cause potential risk of landslides and erosions. These are some examples of the rainfall-induced landslide in Thailand. As you can see from the south, in Nakhon Si Thammarat in 1988, to the north in Phetchabun and Uttaradit in 2001 and 2006, respectively. Next one, please. A number of studies in Thailand were also conducted to investigate the factor that could potentially affect the unsaturated state of the slope. The seepage flow, the pore water pressure regime in the roadway slopes. This one is one of the cases of the concentrated runoff due to the overflowing drainage, which also cause the shallow slides, shallow failure, surface erosion in the Doi Intanon, Chiang Mai, northern Thailand. Next one. This is another case that show a sharp increase in pore water pressure jump, and thus the slope movement of an engineered slope in the northeastern Thailand. The interesting thing is only small rainfall due to only small amount of rainfall due to the overburden pressure from the soil mass over the slope crest cause a big jump in the pore water pressures, and so the slope movement. Next one, please. Here, this is the mechanism of the rainfall-induced landslide that can be explained schematically by the fact that when the rainfall infiltrates into the slope, the pore water pressures increase, and then the effective stress matrix suction decrease, the shear strength and the stability of the slope decrease, and thus causing the slope movement and slide. This phenomenon caused the slope to become more prone to failure. Can you back to the previous one, please? Which is commonly known as the rainfall-induced slope failures, and is one of the most destructive natural disasters that can often random and sudden event that is very hard to predict. Next one, please. With the increasing severity of the landslides, limited annual government fund, and global concern about the environmental issues. The application of the vegetative covers placed over the top of capillary barrier system, also called the CBS, represent a natural based solution because of the lower cost, higher sustainability, more environmental friendly measures, as well as improved statistics comparing to the traditional concrete-based solutions. By using this technique, it is also possible to use the marginal materials and local products such as biochar, soils, vegetations, reclaims, and also recycled material. Next one. And so the objective of the study is to investigate the performance and effectiveness in slope stability, application of vegetation covers placed on top of the CBS for resiliency and sustainability mitigation to rainfall-induced landslides under Thailand tropical climate condition. The unsaturated characteristics of the vegetative and CBS slope covers will be also monitored and evaluated using the field instrumented data from the field trial section in Thailand. And so this study will also provide a good evidence, good supportive data for the advancement in slope resilience and sustainable mitigation with respect to the increase and the faster recovery of factor of safety during the prolonged rainfall events. And next will be Dr. Apiniti will give the presentation for the rest of the slides. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Auckpath. I guess you all can hear me properly. Okay. So, okay. All right, so hello everybody. So I'm gonna continue with the talk. Sorry, something to do. I cannot move my slide. Just hold on. Okay, so just to, for those of you who are not familiar with the soil bioengineering, so our approach, we use the soil bioengineering, and soil bioengineering is not new. Actually, according to SOTER 2002, this is defined as a technology that uses soil engineering practice with ecological principles, to access and construct and maintain living vegetation system. So we use the living natural system to protect and enhance the road network. Because, sometimes only the hard engineering structure may not be the best solution. So we prefer a hybrid technique that utilizes both the vegetation and the structure. Because vegetation is more aesthetic and is more ductile, flexible, and allow for differential settlements. Vegetation becomes stronger with time, it's carbon negative. However, there are some limitations of vegetation because it's only limited and effective to the shallow stabilization. Whereas hard structure is kind of rigid looking, is brittle, and sometimes it's weaker with time. And in terms of carbon dioxide, CO2 generation. So regarding the soil bioengineering in Thailand, I just like to give you a little bit of the timeline of how modern soil bioengineering is developed and used in the road engineering in Thailand. So we quite popularly use the vetiver grass system, which was first introduced by World Bank to the Royal Development Project by King Rama IX in 1991. And there was a first technical paper on vetiver engineering properties by T. and Chauvanit in 1998. And since then, there have been many fundamental research and application on the vetiver grass, particularly by Department of Highway Land Development. And one of the milestones in the bioengineering work is through the PTT gas pipeline project. And we also introduced the erosion control blanket, erosion control logs product around 2005. And in 2007, PTT also developed the flap soil bag. And currently we have tried out different plants species with these geosynthetics products and developed new innovation like vegetated soil bags with the micropies as well. So as Dr. Auckpath has mentioned about the biochar, for those of you who are not familiar with biochar essentially is a charcoal-like material that we use quite heavily in the agriculture as a soil amendment. So biochar is produced by pyrolysis of biomass. So it can be woods, leaves, agricultural residues, in the absence of oxygen. Biochar is a highly porous carbon with high stability, and it can be used to promote plant growth, improve microbial activity, and adjusting the pH of the soil, of the acidic soil, to be suitable for plant growth. And it is actually carbon sequestrating, and it can be also as a source of income for the farmers to be less reliant on chemical fertilizer. And in terms of the environmental problem, we try to encourage the farmers to shift from the slash and burn practice to slash and char. And I think Department of Highway can play an important role in promoting this. And this on the lower right, this is like a biochar check dam that we utilize the check dam as a pit to burn the biochar. And this biochar can be used so to reduce the surface water pollution that coming into the natural water source or into the highway. Okay. We have currently 4 bioengineering test slopes that we also demonstrate both the bioengineering concept and as well as the IoT slope monitoring system. So our IoT slope monitoring system include the altimeter, rain gauge, settlement points, inclinometer, is the in-place inclinometer, so we can read the slope movement real time, and soil moisture sensors, intensiometers for measuring the soil suction, and piezometer for measuring the groundwater table. And we have a number of different soil cover systems, namely the erosion control blanket, the vetiver grass, and the capillary barrier system. We also utilize the screw pies as like a micro pies to stabilize the shallow slice. So as we have limited amount of time, so I will have only time to show only results of one side. So I'm trying to change the slide, but it doesn't change. Okay, yeah, it's just a bit slow. Right, so this just showed how this IoT slope monitoring platform works. So with the sensors that install on site, the rain gauge, tensiometer, and so on, it will send the signal through the IoT data logger device to the cloud through the what we call the NB IoT network, which is a low power wide area network. And then all this raw data will be analyzed in the cloud server. So it will be calculating, for example, the engineering units of different measurements, like the groundwater level, tilting, movement, and so on. And it can also calculate the risk and in terms of the warning, and then compare with the criteria, the threshold for different sensors, like threshold for critical rainfall, the threshold for the water pressure, and so on. So this is the photograph, the aerial photograph of the location of different sensors that we install on the site 1. With my computer, it just doesn't change the slides. Apologize. Okay. All right. So this just showing the photographs of the study sites at different times. So we finished the construction in July this year. So this is quite new, and this is the current kind of situation, current condition. So we can see that we have 3 different soil cover systems, namely the erosion control blanket that we use the coconut fiber and PE netting. And the second one on the middle is a vetiver grass system with a bamboo silt fence. And on the far right, this is the capillary barrier system, or CBS, that we use the recycling aggregate asphalt as a coarse grain, and the fine grain material is a biochar mixed with the local soils. And we plant some rootsy grass and with some livestock as well. So you can see from the monitoring result of the pore pressure. So these red curves here show the negative water pressure in the CBS. So the CBS perform quite well in the sense that it can preserve the suction or the negative pore pressure underneath in the slopes. Whereas for the other cover systems, the pore pressure seems to be relatively higher. But when you look at the soil moisture that we monitor inside the GO cells actually is higher in the capillary barrier system. So the biochar does a job in absorbing the moisture. And the moisture that is absorbed in biochar is actually used to promote the plant growth. So you can see that the plant growth is much better in the capillary barrier system. So you can compare these soil cover treatments with the control, which is the not using anything, so the bare slope case. So you can see the highly eroded toe. So this kind of preliminary result is quite encouraging. And we also went on to do some capacity building for the staff of the Department of Highway. So we instruct them about the different bioengineering technique, and particularly about the biochar. So we demonstrate how we can use what we call the Kontiki kiln to make the biochar that the personnel can kind of reuse or can burn this biochar from the tree trimmings from their routine landscape work. So which actually can be used to promote the bio-circular green economy concept to the highway maintenance as well. So just to conclude, so now we have shown that slope failure and erosion become more severe due to the climate change and increasing infrastructure development. And we place emphasis on the soil bioengineering technique, and that we combine the ecological principles and sound engineering practice. And we also evaluate the performance of this bioengineering technique through the slope monitoring system, the IoT monitoring system, that we can use also for early warning and give the real-time results of the performance of the slopes. And we also introduce about the biochar that we use in our capillary barrier system, which is considered as a great potential for both preventing the slope erosion and enhance the bio-circular green economy. And also talk a little bit about the community involvement, capacity building for the Department of Highway staff as well. So with this, I'd like to end our talk. So thank you very much. Terima kasih.
To increase the protection of the slope. Okay, we continue, ladies and gentlemen. We come to the Q&A session for the discussion, and I'll invite 3 questions, probably 2 from this offline. Okay, we have 1 here and 2, and also I would like to prepare for, okay, we have 4 actually. Okay, don't you mind to walk forward, or you have microphone there. Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Andrea. I'm from the National Road Implementation Agency in East Nusa Tenggara. I'd like to ask Mr. Tanaka-san about the BSC. What type of soil is suitable for implementation of BSC? Because in East Nusa Tenggara, the soil type, the plasticity index is high and has a high dwelling potential. We have a lot of exposed slope there and a lot of landslide problems. And apart from the soil type, is there any other criteria for BSC treatment, such as slope gradient or the temperature or any other criteria? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. The question one is type of soil. Okay. Actually, so according to our test so far, we tested installed in my country and also the Nepal. Nepal is, as I explained, a very severe condition of the soil. Very dry and in the dry season, and also heavy rain in the rainy season, and red soil, that one. So so far some restriction of the soil is not yet justified yet, but so we found some successful completion, vegetation in the bad soil where the few years no vegetation come. And the second one, the criteria we haven't yet prepared, still under prepare, and the slope and the temperature. Slope, maybe I showed some photos. So I think so. We have the same problem. There's the right of way problem, and we have to cut the sharp slope. But normal conventional method is difficult for the steep slope. But as seen in the photo, the combination BSC and the conventional method, I mean the soil net or something like that, is very well worked. Is that okay? Thank you.
Okay, is it answer your question? Okay. For the second question, please state your name and your organization.
Yes. Hello, good afternoon. Actually, almost same with the previous question from Mr. Adria, but maybe I will emphasize on the specific soil. Is it applicable to implement in certain soil? Since in Indonesia we have many areas that's covered by certain soil, for instance, clay shell. Once it's exposed, clay shell. Okay, once it's exposure to the air, it really can become a problem. And yeah, maybe almost same, the maximum grade of slope that can adopt that, both of technology for Tanaka-san and from Thailand. Thank you.
Okay, I'll give the first opportunity for you, Tanaka.
The slope, I remember that in Nepal, we tried 0. Around the 45 degrees slope, we tried. And sorry, I'm not familiar the clay soft soil in Indonesia. So as I said, so we are now we are doing this method in Japan and trial abroad completed in Nepal, and now we are doing in Malaysia. So we are looking for the suitable or some problem site in Indonesia to challenge some problematic soil condition, as you mentioned. So if you have you can introduce some suitable site. So please, let's discuss later or contact me.
Okay. I will go to Dr. Auckpath.
Excuse me.
Are you still with us?
Yes, I think Dr. Apiniti
Okay.
will handle the situation properly. He's an expert in this field, so I let Dr. Apiniti answer this question.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Can I say now? Okay. Okay. It's quite interesting
Please.
that it's a question about the clay shell, because as far as I understand, clay shell is highly moisture sensitive and degradable upon wetting and drying cycles. As climate change is more severe, we're going to have a lot more problem with this kind of material. So I think that the slope cover system like capillary barrier system or the biochar is very useful for these problems, because this soil cover system like biochar, if you help maintain the moisture level in the clay shell, not to fluctuate too much, and it will also maintain the temperature. So I think definitely it will be very interesting if you try to apply this bio soil cover system or capillary barrier system with biochar for clay shells. And not only that, and for the expensive soil, there has been a number of studies that show that biochar can be used to alleviate or to reduce the shrink and swell problem in the clay soils, I think.
It's really good. Yeah. I think it's very promising. Okay, we can go to third question. Okay, the lady at the back. Or I mean, a gentleman at the back first, because I remember that he raised hand first.
Hello. I'm Randy Satria, representative of PTPP Persero Tbk, one of the biggest Indonesian state-owned enterprise in construction and investment sector. I'm grateful to be here learning many things about climate change, resilience, and disaster
Sorry, can you put your microphone a little bit close to you?
Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, can you increase your voice?
Okay, I repeat it. I'm grateful to be here learning many things about climate change, resilience, and disaster management for roads from all the honorable speakers, especially from Mr. Takaaki Tanaka and Mr. Auckpath and Mr. Apiniti. I am interested in the topic that you have delivered about biological soil cross method using algae and biochar. I think that's a smart and nature-friendly way and very much applicable in road construction to prevent the slope failure or landslide. My question is for both of you. First, I want to ask, is there any, maybe it's a bit similar to previous question. First, I want to ask, is there any certain circumstance to apply this BSC or biochar method, such as minimum slope degrees? Or how long it can it survive in tropical weather country? Second, how much does it cost to total project budget in percentage compared to the one without using BSG method or biochar? I hope you got my question. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. The question number one is slope condition, applicable slope, and also applicable for tropical country or not. Is that correct?
I mean, is there any certain circumstance, such as minimum slope degrees?
Yeah. In Nepal, that case, so as I said, 45 degree, 1-1, we tried. And further, more steep slope, so sorry, I have no data yet. And applying to the tropical country, now we are doing the trial test in Malaysia. We could get more data in Malaysia. We are doing with JICA. And as I said, I repeat, I want to say that we want to do BSD in this country, Indonesia, with you. And sorry, can you repeat the second question?
For the second question is about have you tried to calculate how much it will cost?
The cost thing also still, so far the implementation phase is only in my country, Japan, and powder itself is produced in my country. So maybe at this moment you have to import the material. But I don't know the cost data in outside my country. But the alga species is, as I said, cosmopolitan species. We confirmed the existence in all over the world, including Indonesia. So in future, I believe someone produce the powder here, then it can be reduce the cost.
So yes, I suppose it's answer your question. So we can probably we can go to the next question. Oh, okay.
Thank you. My name is Heri Paza. I would like to make a question to Pak Redrik. According to your paper that you have presented, is it in regard to the identifying the accurate data of the inspection? I suggest to you that after the data is collected, we can go into the doing the maintenance straightforward without analysis. What do you think? With that, my suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. The maintenance is related, close related with the defect. That's why we explain in the new guideline of inspection to how to the inspector can define the maintenance based on the condition marks. That's all. That is my. But sometimes the maintenance in level 1 is not quite detailed. I think that's why we propose the maintenance based on the level 3 and level 4. And also the inspector can see the type of defect in the example of the picture. That's my answer. Is that okay? Oh. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Probably. Do we have time? Like 1 minute? Can I go to you, Louis, for last question for me? Okay. I think you've been demonstrate a very good prediction on how we actually get which part of the road network they're very vulnerable. And actually, since you work in the main roads of Western Australia, how the study been trigger the policymaker there? I mean, how is your result on your scenario that impacted the policy making in Western Australia?
Thank you for the question, Yusuf. So the intent for the tool itself was to build our understanding of where the vulnerabilities are across the entire state road network. At this point, we've only done the one pilot trial and the pilot study, and we expect to be able to build that out and be able to build the tool into such a point we'll be able to do the full state road network. And the importance of that is we'll be able to see where the vulnerabilities might lie at a strategic level when you're looking at national routes and how vulnerable they are, and whether there's certain links to other parts of Australia or that might be particularly vulnerable, and so we can understand what the national impact is. And so the idea there is to feed that information up into policy to then influence further change and to drive investment at and to be able to build better business cases for strategic investment. And that might even go as far as not just looking at the road network, but looking at other modes of transport as well, and how that can help improve the road network resilience to climate events and climate impacts.
Thank you, Luis. And ladies and gentlemen, we have finally come to the end of part of this session, and I would like to give applause to all our speakers.
Thank you for the speakers and moderator for presentation and interactive discussion on building capacity for adaptation and resilience. We learn experiences from Australia, Japan, Indonesia, and also Thailand on adaptation and resilience for roads, bridges, and slopes. I believe that there are still participants who are still interested in the topic, so maybe you can still approach the speakers while having lunch outside. Ladies and gentlemen, before the lunch break, I kindly remind for those who wants to join the technical visit to Kretek Bridge tomorrow, please register through the barcode at the back side of your ID card, or you may access the barcode or link tree probably shown on the screen later. Finally, we will have a lunch break for an hour. For participants joining on site, lunch will be served at the foyer of the ballroom. Kindly return to the ballroom at 2 o'clock. Thank you and have a nice lunch. Distinguished guests, so this is the barcode for the registration for the technical visit tomorrow. Please scan this barcode to register, and please also check the link tree for the material seminar for Jogja 2022 International Seminar. Thank you.